Welcome everyone, my fellow educators and school leaders. Welcome to our TomoClub podcast series, where I'm Avinash, co-founder of TomoClub, and I try to get our insights from school leaders through very genuine conversation. And today's topic is something we have never talked about in our podcast series, which has been elevating the student voices for strategic planning and school investment. So we are not just talking surface level conversation, but also how it can impact the school strategies. So especially right now, when school needs to be more data driven in the decision making. So this is going to be very fun, and I'm excited to have Dr. Erin as a guest to speak on it. So, Erin, would you like to give a quick introduction for the audience?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. Dr. Erin Rathke, I am the superintendent in Eastern Carver County Schools. That is in Minnesota. And it is a suburban outer ring district outside of Minneapolis. It has around 9,000 students, so I'm a mid-level district. So I'm super excited to be here. I've held positions of assistant superintendent, principal, assistant principal, school improvement specialist, instructional coach, and teacher. And so I've really journeyed from the classroom all the way to the superintendent seat.
Absolutely. That's like a beautiful journey from like the educator level up to this highest level. And you know what? I'll tell you one small insight. So when any educational technology companies start working, they always look out the East Coast and the West Coast states. But for us, Minnesota is also special because we've been working with Vesica Public School District in Minnesota, and like the superintendent told me very beautiful insight that the urban cities or the big cities students, they still have opportunities, while I want to make sure that my kids compete with the city folks. So we are more hungry, and we tend to be more ignored by the companies because they are focusing on towards cities. So he gave me such a counterintuitive insight while working with schools, that look at us more than others, we'll have more money and more hungry for innovation. And I think I've taken that advice, and now we're working with so many school districts, from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and it has been quite a journey. So
Yes.
talking about this topic, I want to make sure to ask you straightforward, how do you make sure that student feedback isn't just cosmetic but actually embedded into the district planning? Is it more reactive, more routine, more truly integrated into decision making? So how does
Mhm.
it work right now?
Well, that's a really good question because it was one of the things, I think when you interview as a superintendent or a principal or a teacher, you talk about being student centered.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really common thing that people say. And as I became the superintendent, I talked to our cabinet, our senior leaders, and just really shared about what does it really mean for us to be student centered and listening to our students, because we've already had our experience
Hmm.
and now we're experiencing for them their experience. And one of the things that I heard so much through the pandemic was, what was the pandemic actually really going to teach us? And I think listening to our kids has just been so critical, because the experience of a world pandemic has changed maybe how they think or what they want or what they see. And one of the things that I've really learned is that our parents want something a little bit different than our students. And how do you integrate those two things together? And so how do we make it not cosmetic? I think I what we did this year was not one initiative or one thing that lifted student voice, but multiple things. And then expected that we would make decisions around it. We had students presenting at the cabinet level, we had students presenting at the board level, we had students presenting at the building level, administration, so that their voice was heard by leaders who make decisions. And the way you perpetuate and keep student voice going is actually give them feedback and say, this is because of what you said, this is what we did. Because of what you said, this is what we did. And we're really have been really, really intentional about telling our student groups that, so that they see the impact of
Hmm.
their voice. And that has, what I think has created like this excitement of, oh, maybe they are going to really listen to me because they made some decisions based on what I said.
Hmm. Okay. That very interesting if you have tiers of opportunities for them to speak up. But the very first question to comes to my mind after I heard you is, how do you handle the tension, between the students when they share their inputs and the district is not able to act on it? So how do you manage that expectations while still making them feel heard?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have adult advisory groups as well, and I've brought their voices to my parent groups and my adult groups. And, adults are actually the ones that have the hardest time hearing the voices of students. And
Yeah.
so I've had advisories say, well, we know better than they do. And what I have found with students is that if you explain your why and
Hmm.
explain why it can or can't be done, they really actually understand and get it if you have a real and authentic conversation with them and let them know what the barriers are in front of you. And so there have been some things I haven't been able to follow through on, or that they didn't realize it was going to cost so much money, or there was
Yeah.
or perspective. But just sitting down and really listening and saying, here are the two things I can do, but here's the thing maybe I can't do. And so just being real and authentic.
Hmm.
I just believe our students are the smartest people in the room. They can tell if you really are serious about
Hmm.
listening to them.
No, I think intent triumphs everything, even if failures sometimes, because the intent purity is all what matters. In fact, while working with schools, you won't believe a lot of school leaders will give you a break, like at an early stage, provided you tell them the real intent behind what you're coming with. I think it's kind of overlooked. It's kind of not given the enough value. People tend to be much more opportunistic, but it's not that obvious out there. People still understand the intent. So I'm happy that you brought that up. But do you think we have gone too far in letting adults speak for students, instead of actually listening to them?
I do. It's so interesting because I even think as a parent of a student who has a husband who isn't an educator, and
Mm.
hearing his conversations as we've been experiencing parenting around grading and the ways that we interacted with school, it's very different. And so we as adults at whatever ages, we perceive rigor, we perceive it being difficult by the amount of time you sit in a seat, the amount of homework that you have, the amount of books you're hauling home. And our students, from my experience with listening to our students don't see rigor as that.
Mm.
They see rigor differently. They see it in different modes of learning, like being online, having a blended class,
Yeah.
being able to manage their time. So being able to move a little bit differently through the school. And, all of our students want autonomy. I mean, if you talk to a kindergartner and ask them what they want, they will talk about their autonomy as a kid. They want to zip up their own coat. They want to put on their own boots. They want to go out. Well, all the way up, our middle schoolers talk about autonomy. They want to walk to their classes by themselves. And our high schoolers talk about autonomy because that's what we're doing. We're guiding students along their developmental
Mm.
uh, experience, and all the way through they're trying to become independent adults, but yet we want to put them in a box and not give them the autonomy that they're saying that they want. It's just been such a great learning for me listening to our students and just trying to understand all the way from kindergartners to
Mm.
seniors what it really means to have an experience and be able to put their voice into the space, and for it to not look like what their parents experience at school.
Yeah.
And is that okay? And can we have the evolution of that? I don't think there's a perfect answer or a right answer. I just think it's about evolving with our kids and listening to them as they think about and giving them choices. So some students are going to be better in a seat. Some students can handle a blended class. Some kids can do an online class. And so how do we create experiences and choices for kids to personalize what they need to
Mhm.
be the best they can be for who they are at that moment?
Yeah. No, actually, I think I also relate to the concept that curse of knowledge is a real thing. I think sometimes when you are naive, you tend to solve things with the first principle and you just look at them in a very simple equation. But with your baggage of experiences, you tend to sometimes make your own biases. And hence, simple things can be complicated. So I do think that curse of knowledge is a real thing. And tell me about student agency. Like I have a 1 year old and he wants to do everything by himself. So
Absolutely.
and it's like you need to be very patient with him, because if he's gonna make things, he's gonna take his own time, he's gonna make mistakes and still cry about it. But you wanna still make sure that you don't pound on it and say, I'll do it rather than you. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure how much longer I can give that agency to the child, but I'm trying.
Yes.
So okay, last question about student aspect. Then I want to shift your focus towards more teacher and administration. Let's say if you give students the choice to decide school budgets, where do you think they would cut the cost, and where do you think they will double the cost?
That's a great question. We actually did that. So I'm really excited you asked. So uh, we started our YPE student group this year. It is Youth Participatory Evaluation, if you've never heard of it. We had students apply at the middle level and at the high school level, and they learned research-based strategies. They learned how to do quantitative data, qualitative data, Excel documents, how to do a survey, how to collect data and analyze it, and then make decisions.
Mhm.
And they did that throughout the year. They reported out to the school board twice. They reported out to me twice. And the first thing we did was had them talk about what was important to them about the budget and then interview
Mhm.
people about that, because our district, like many districts, are in some but really tough budget times,
No, it's a tough
and
time.
wanted to hear what students thought. So things that came up for them is student safety is a huge priority for our students. So
Mhm.
that was one. They want to maintain programming and make sure that they have choices around classes and programming. And
Mhm.
then they talked a lot about mental health and wanting to ensure that there was enough mental health. And then they had some opinions of other things that maybe they didn't understand or have perspectives of, but it was their perspective of ways that we needed to do better communicating. So I would say programming, student safety, mental health were things we heard a lot about.
That's impressive, literally. And
Yeah.
best part is that even if you have heard this and you would do some amount of development in that direction, it will automatically improve the sense of belongingness. It will improve the intent of students to show up and attendance. And we all know how all of these things are interconnected with academic score and school climate. So I think it's a brilliant move, to get to hear them out. And at the same time, I'm pretty sure those goals are actually state goals, anyways. So
Yes.
they are just helping you get more ideas on the table. So hats off. I thought this idea is this question is gonna be haywired, but I didn't know you were so prepared because you were practicing it. So I think I love it. Okay, now I'll talk an example that when you did that impactful work at Justice Page Middle School, what was your experience? Can you walk us through it from the
Yeah.
initial catalyst? What motivated you to do it, to what did you learn during this process? So it might be very helpful for people to map it to their own personal problems, but would love to know your entire experience there.
Sure. Well, this is one of my favorite stories of my entire career. And, you can think you're student centered until students push you to make a change that you have no idea of what it's going to turn into. So I became the principal of Ramsey Middle School in Minneapolis Public Schools. So I have urban and suburban, experience. It's it was the second largest middle school in Minneapolis Public Schools, Ramsey Middle School. So first day, I'm standing outside. I mean, I remember what I was wearing. I'm out on the big set, stairs, waving to kids as they're coming in. And they have on t-shirts that say rename my school, and they have Ramsey crossed out.
Okay.
And they were on a journey to say this name, Alexander Ramsey, did not represent who they wanted to be and who the school was to the community and to them. And so, I mean, I was like, wow, this is really great. This is, good for them. And I'm like, I have been a principal for 5 seconds, and I'm just thinking this is not a good idea.
Hmm.
So of course, there were teacher leaders, just huge shout out to the staff at Justice Page Middle School. They're amazing. There were teacher leaders that were helping the students, and the students were sharing, particularly in their social studies class where they were learning about history.
Hmm.
And they came to me and I was like, this is great. I really appreciate this, but I haven't been a principal very long. I'm trying to think about I'm navigating politics. I don't even know what this means. And so they agreed, they understood, but the students were like, nope, this does not represent us.
Hmm.
Please let us keep exploring. And so it was all student led, of course, with some guidance from adults, but they did research. They were able to say why they didn't want the name. So then we were like, okay, what's the name you want? And they explored multiple names. They did presentations to the community. They surveyed people, and there was a range of names that people were really excited about, but maybe not until someone said Justice Page Middle School. And so, if Justice Allen Page from Minnesota was a Minnesota Viking, first African American Supreme Court judge, and just very well known he plays an instrument outside during the marathon. I mean, running. I mean, he's just very well known in our community. Well, someone said Justice Page Middle School, and it's like you could almost hear it still in the room, like
Hmm.
that's it.
Yeah.
And of course, we had to get permission from him,
Hmm.
and he agreed and never engaged with us. And the other part that was an issue was the policy in Minneapolis Public Schools was you couldn't name after something after someone who was alive.
Okay.
And so we asked the superintendent to come.
Hmm.
So not only did the students change the name of their school, but Anne did it with lots of community feedback, but they changed policy at the board level. And so the second to last day of school, we
Hmm.
were at the board meeting. The board agreed to let us change the name. And Justice Alan Page and Diane Page, his late wife, showed up on the steps on the very last day of school and waved to students. And we started the following school year as Justice Page Middle School and rebranded the school. And I would just say is a beacon of hope and change in that community. And it's really funny. The best part of this story is, I'm a brand new principal. I sent out my first communication and I'm like, at Ramsey Middle School, we make world changers. That was like going to be my tagline or like my thing I was going to talk about. And my last letter that I wrote to the community that year is like, little did I know
Hmm.
that actually not only did I believe that kids were going to be world changers, but they would change the world in one
Yeah.
year
Hmm.
and their own community. And so the school is rebranded, it's evolved. I mean, Justice Page and his late wife Diane have been integral parts of the community. There are now new murals on both sides of the building. It's a very tall building that were painted by students in the community that reflect images of Justice Page when he got the Medal of Honor. Um, Mementos of him standing up, in front of the school and just a real tribute, not only visually, but just as a reflection of students really pressing and saying, this is something we want and this is who we want to be reflected as in our community.
Wow. That's quite an inspiring story. I think you know, so as a educational technology founder, whenever we reach out to schools, like I'm telling something which is more internal to us, we know if the school leader has not been at the position for more than 3 years, it will be very difficult for them to bring a new change. So
Mhm.
we would rather not pitch to a new school leader because they're still navigating a lot of nuances and they don't want to be changing a lot of things because that might be frowned upon or they don't want to be uh, like upset some people. So it's a very difficult for them to bring new curriculums also, and let alone change the name. So hats off to the students and hats off to you to figure it out. Must be one hell of a journey to do it. And congratulations for that. Now, if I think about it, from again, I had one more question. I thought my questions were over, but what do you think about the how do you make sure that everyone is heard of? Like sometimes the loudest voice is the most heard voice, um, and it doesn't mean that they're the smartest voice. So how do you make sure, more from the equity point of view, that everyone is heard? So yeah, I think it's an open-ended question, but you get it, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. And I don't know that I have the perfect answer yet, or if I do it perfectly every time. I think one question that my cabinet leaders and I talk about a lot is whose voices aren't at the table.
Hmm.
And I think you said it earlier, schools are about we should be data driven.
Yeah.
But that also means that we are looking at perspectives around ensuring that it's representative and reflective of the demographics of our district. That's why we said we wanted it to be reflective of students, not just parents or not just the loudest voices, like you said. So I think one is being data driven, and I think two is being fully committed to chasing voices. So I'll just give you two examples. So we do an annual survey at the end of the year. We have a REA, an executive director of research evaluation and assessment. I'm grateful because she's amazing and data driven. And we do an annual survey. And, there is sometimes a perception that the annual survey might be done by people who can navigate the system, who aren't, that do not have barriers to the system. And she interviewed 300 people in various places, being out in the community, at events, talking to staff, students, parents,
Hmm.
to ensure that we had a demographic reflection so that we could understand some voice around our annual survey. Because yes and no is different than commentary.
Yeah.
So that's one example. I would say the other thing is we have an immersion pathway that's only graduated 2 classes. And so we have some work to do to think about how's our experience going. And so our assistant superintendent, who is also amazing, did some surveying of families, staff, trying to understand experiences. Well, it is very clear, and it's a dual immersion.
Hmm.
So there's a percentage of Latino students or Spanish speaking students and white students. It's necessary to have a dual immersion, and it is very clear that we need to reach out. As we looked at the demographics of the survey, it is clear we have some work to do to ensure that it is reflective of the full community of that immersion pathway. And so instead of making huge urgent decisions based on that information, we have work to do to make sure the voices that are missing are also reflected as we make decisions moving forward based on that data. So it's really about the commitment to say whose voices are missing,
Yeah.
and are we willing to chase the voices that are missing from whatever it is that we're looking at. And it's just a commitment, and it is something that you hire for, you
Yeah.
cultivate in your team, and you ensure that it is happening by asking good questions, and not making urgent, rash decisions without the thoughts
Yeah.
of many as you move forward.
No, I'm glad you said it's a work in progress. Honestly, I think being honest about it is the first step of any change. And like when you mention the right questions, like one of the things that we always try to do is not ask leading questions. So if you ask somebody, how good are you feeling or how great it is, it's misleading because you're already setting up the stage that it is great to a certain degree. So more neutral questions that are something times more than important than even anything else. So yeah, kudos to that. Now you brought yourself another topic is about how do you develop that culture, because even though you have whatever beautiful fantastic ideas, but if you can't percolate it to the everyone, it's not going to work. So tell me your experience about developing that culture.
Well, I'm finishing up my first year. I was also the interim superintendent for about half of the previous school year. So, 1.5 years. And what I would say is, I don't know that I've developed that culture yet, but I do know that our school leaders, our senior leaders, they know that I am committed to student voice. Our school board knows I'm committed to student voice, because if you look at my calendar, and your calendar is always a reflection of your priorities, it is clear that not only am I, but our team and our leaders we are in schools, and that is the priority of the work of a district.
Mhm.
District leaders need to prioritize what's happening in school. So I worked with my cabinet leaders to just be really thoughtful about how we're scheduling on our calendars. And so on Wednesdays, my whole calendar is booked off that says schools and student voices.
Oh,
And I went out to every building 3 times, elementary, middle, and high. I have, 7 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 3 high schools, and also a birth to 5 community education, but just went out and said, set up some time for me to meet with students. Here's the time I can come. It doesn't matter what grade they're in,
mm,
and just let me talk to them. So I think starting to model that my calendar reflects my goals, that I went out to talk to students and our leaders knew that I did, and then continuing to lift their voice at whatever table I'm at, whether it's with parents, whether it's with the school board, whether it's with building leaders, cabinet, but listening and hearing trends, themes, and understanding. So talking to enough students
mhm.
to make sure that I have some through lines that I can share wherever I'm at. So I met with over 600 students this year in various ways around various topics. I will say my executive director of communications comes with me all the time, just so she can hear, because it is about, marketing your
Yeah.
school district's about telling your story, but it's not my story, it's our kids' story. And so having her with me has been really critical.
Mhm.
Um, and so that has been a huge benefit for us. And then it generates some ideas around how we continue to lift their voice.
Fantastic. I think that's it. When you are dedicating your time slot of a week on this, I think that's the capstone of anything to change. Because let's say, even if I want to bring a small softer change in the entire system, and if I'm not constantly following up or making it obvious that it has to be done, that habit doesn't form. And even if they have formed that habit over 6 months, it's gonna get redundant if that's not the centerpiece. So I think dedicating and 600 students meeting up, I'm sure your director of communication is never gonna have fun in any other district, because I don't think so. He or she is gonna get such kind of content anywhere else in the entire US. Okay. Um, Very interesting second part that I want to bring up. Is I read about the your county's strategic plan about personalized learning. And
Yep.
of course, I think that's an ultimate expression of student voices in digital instruction, because until now, personalization was kind of impossible, because it all gonna be on the teachers end of how are they causing that personalization. And it's not possible with such a diverse population. And not only just the population point of view, but also the learning gaps, the student with neurodiversity in the classroom. So there's so many elements. Um, can you share me a bit about this initiative, of how are you leading it from the personalized learning point of view now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Eastern Carver County, many years ago, was kind of on the cutting edge of personalized learning. And I think we've had an opportunity right now to rethink, as particularly after the pandemic, what does personalized learning mean, and still have alignment through a strategic plan. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're still wrestling with what is the very best. So one of the things that we did this year is we developed a portrait of a graduate, which was what I believed was the next step
Mm-hmm.
around our strategic plan. We engaged over 1,400 people, and we used a process uh, that you could look at what people shared and then react to, and rate that thought. And we had over 10,000 reactions to the 1,400 voices around the portrait of a graduate. And I met with students individually and in groups and talked to them about portrait of a graduate. What did our community, what did this community really want for a graduate who walks across the stage in Eastern Carver County schools? What does that person look like?
Mm-hmm.
And what is their experience? And so after we have that piece, then we are going to roll back and decide how personalized learning impacts that. But what we're hearing very clearly is that And we know personalized learning is going to be really important in a generation of AI.
Yeah.
We have to have students, we have to be able to personalize for our students based on the needs of the community and the needs of our ever-changing world. Our kindergarten students are coming in, are going to be being prepared for jobs that aren't even alive and created right now.
Right.
And so, how do we evolve that through an ever-changing world and meet the needs of our community and the needs of our students? And so, we continue to talk about our kids like voice and choice. They
Mhm.
want enrichment opportunities. They want relevant opportunities that they can make connections to their careers. And even at the middle level, students were telling us that they are worried about being adults and getting jobs.
Mhm.
And they want to know how what they're learning connects to what their future could be. And so that is one of the pieces that we're focusing right now around how to personalize learning for the needs of our students and what they're actually really desiring for their future.
I think that's exactly the possible route is the AI front. So have you guys thought about whether it's professional development for teachers on AI or any AI literacy curriculum for students? Have you guys worked on that domain?
Yes, so we have a digital learning team that is excellent, and we are working on aligning what AI means for
Mhm.
our students and for our educators. And so we've worked on some tools on how our educators can use AI to benefit their profession. And make life a little bit easier for them in lots of ways and automate and use that tool to be a more effective educator. And we also, and I think in the educational world, there's this tension of should we use this, should we not?
Yeah.
How should we use it? How should we not? And instead of telling our students don't use it, we're trying to figure out how to support them in using it appropriately and allowing our teachers to think about what changes for them when you can just type in GPT chat, what's this answer? How do we create a more rigorous question to ensure that our students have to be critical thinkers to answer it? And so I think it's a both and
Mhm.
for our students and our teachers. But what we shared at the teaching and learning level was we can't walk away from it. We have to decide what it's going to be for us and give our students and our educators and our families tools to ensure that we can leverage it that still benefits students, but still helps them become critical thinkers in their future.
Brilliant. I think that's exactly the way it should be. And in fact, Minnesota is one of those early states which actually came up with a proper AI guidelines and a mandate from the state. Otherwise, like states like Illinois or other states are still figuring it out. Florida is still in the task force stage. So Minnesota was early mover in that as well. So yeah, great job on that. Okay. This comes makes me come to the last part. I think this is the toughest part that I have always seen with school leaders is the budget, the school investments and budgeting. So, given that there is such a significant financial pressure nearly through all the states, all the districts right now, so how are student voices practically and effectively inform decisions now about resource allocation or program offerings, especially in this constrained budget situations right now? So you can explain me a little bit about the budget situation right now and how you're still prioritizing student voices in that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough times in education, finance, and it is complex. And in the state of Minnesota, we've been waiting for a while to get our state budget to make some decisions. So a couple things that I will just use that I share, like I shared previously, our YPE group, our youth
Yeah.
participatory evaluators. They did some listening at the beginning of the year as we walked into needing to cut $5 million.
Mhm.
And so we used their voice to think about prioritizing and, you know, there in the world of education, you're not creating a product. Our money is people. And so our finance director always says, it's not like I can sell a bag of chips, put less chips in the bag and
Yeah.
charge more money, less product, more money, and make more money. That's not what education is. And so it is always tough to cut resources because it always impacts students, and that should make us lose sleep because none of us want to cut anything from students. So there are a couple things just, and I shared this previously. I think one of the number one things that our students talked about was mental health.
Mm.
And we also are asking them, what does that mean to you? Because my definition of mental health and their definition of mental health may be different.
Yeah.
Um, so we did our one of our secondary teaching and learning leaders what has been out listening to students and talking about college and career readiness and what does this mean. And what we did was there was a line item of money that we knew that was possibly coming from the state, and we did some innovative positioning, hiring based on what students told us.
Mm.
So it was around mental health and career in college. So we created another position and used that funding. So how do I do that innovatively and strategically? Hard because it's limited resources. But when you do have resources, how do you know what our kids need, know what our community needs, know what the schools need to use that money strategically? The other thing that I will say is just as a new superintendent, I mean, and it doesn't happen in 1 year, but how do you look at organizational efficiencies to ensure that what you were doing is what you should still be doing? And are you getting a return on investment? And do you need to reallocate resources? It's
Mm.
not easy. And again, we're always limited for kids, and there is not enough. And it has to align your strategic priorities and ensuring that the resources you do have are allocated to the places that are the most important for the most amount of students.
Oh, that's a big target in front of you. I think cutting down 5 million is going to be tough. And I hope you guys achieve that goal in the most optimum manner, because I know for districts, their fixed cost is irrespective of number of kids. So the bill is still going to come of electricity and water or teachers hiring cost or running the school. So it's, I wish you get more enrollments. I think that's a better way to say it, because then hopefully that should increase your revenues. But yeah, this was fantastic, Dr. Erin. You are really deep into student voices, and I'm so happy that those kids have you
Thank
as your superintendent, and the school teachers have you as a superintendent, because I wish there are more school leaders who can follow your path. So, okay, any specific tips for any school leader who's listening to this podcast, that how they should go about it?
Yeah, block some time off,
Mm.
decide what your initiatives are, ask students what they think, and then listen to them and report back how you're going to make change based on what they said. I mean, I think it's a really simple reciprocal cycle, and you'll never be sorry. It will make you find joy. I know for me, being with students and listening to them just helps me continue to have joy every day,
Yeah.
and ensuring that they are the reason and they are the heart of everything that we do. And so listening to them will not only help you be a better leader, but it will fill your bucket.
Well said, because a lot of school leaders, especially the district folks, they tend to be away from direct instructions or teacher management in day-to-day life. So I think they do tend to miss this element. So I'm glad you could figure out a way to meet 600 students in a year. That's insane. And congratulations for that. So yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you.
Hope you had fun.
I did. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna hit pause.